Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Jason Davis here with you on Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, Kick TV. I feel like I'm going to have to let this music go just a little bit longer. Let the vocals kick in a little bit. Because you guys are in for a treat today. I'm going to let it go. You're in for a treat today. As you know, we ran an Indiegogo campaign at the start of the year for Soccer Morning. You guys came through with flying colors, and as part of that campaign, you could contribute at a level that would give you the opportunity to select our music for the show for one day. Now, we've got some playlists in. We are collecting all of that information. Emails went out last week in a debauculous fashion. Good job. Good job, Trevor. But we do have a bunch of playlists. We do have a bunch of music that we're going to be able to play on the show for those people who contributed to the show. I'm very happy about that. But today's program, the first edition of DJ for a Day, is courtesy of Nathan McVitie. And he has one song he would like to play. One song he would like is the soundtrack to this episode. So just be prepared. That's all I'm going to say. Be prepared. On this program today, David Cartledge will join us to talk about El Clasico, the situation in Spain yesterday. Man, what an edition of El Clasico we had at the Bernabeu between Real Madrid and Barcelona. That was one for the ages. 4-3 Barcelona. You had 3 second-half penalties. You had red cards. You had amazing goals, amazing passes, fantastic stuff. If you missed El Clasico yesterday, and maybe Sunday is your family day, or perhaps you were watching MLS, which is on at the same time. I did a little multi-screen action, but if you missed it, you missed one hell of a game. So I'll talk about that with David in a couple of minutes. After David, at the bottom of the hour, 10:30, Luke Moore from the Football Ramble will join us to go through the Premier League weekend, because there was fantastic stuff happening in the Premier League as well. Big score lines this weekend in the Premier League. 6-0 Chelsea dumps on Arsenal in Arsene Wenger's 1,000th game. What a present from Jose to Arsene Wenger. Here you go. Congratulations on 1,000 games with Arsenal. 6 goals on top of your head. Liverpool scored 6 on Cardiff. Man City dropped 5 on Fulham. You had Spurs coming back against Southampton, when I thought for sure they had Spurs that up pretty badly. Everybody, all you Spurs fans, did you really have hope that they would figure that out and win that game? I doubt it. So we'll go through the Premier League weekend with Luke Moore at 10:30. And then MLS. Charlie Bohm from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire will join us to go through the MLS happenings. No big score lines in MLS, but we did have some events. We did have some interesting results. We had. I'm going to ask Charlie who he thinks the best team in MLS is right now, and I'll tell you, in my opinion. Oh, maybe I'll say it this way, because small sample size early in the season, who knows? But I'm going to say that if I had to pick who's the most fun to watch, or has the most potential, or showing the most to start the season, it's got to be FC Dallas. Got to be FC Dallas. Oscar Pareja arrived. That team looks invigorated. Fabian Castillo, if he figures it out, 21-year-old kid, if he figures it out, he's dangerous. He's one of the best players in the league if he is consistent. Consistency. That's your problem. There's your problem. Consistency. Figure that out. We'll talk about what's going on in Toronto, because they got their second win of the campaign. 1-0 over DC United. Jermaine Defoe scores again. Michael Bradley got his head stapled. Go check on Twitter for this picture that Cathal Kelly tweeted out. Cathal Kelly. How do you say that guy's name again? We've gone over this before. I always butcher it. Go find that picture. Staples in Michael Bradley's head. And he ran straight over the referee. Silvio Petrescu. That's a nice welcome back, Silvio, because look, the referees finally figured it out with MLS and Pro. So they've got a deal. They've got a bargaining agreement. So now the regular refs are back, and Petrescu's on the field, and Michael Bradley says, "What are you doing? Get out." It was like Petrescu was trying to play the ball, and Michael Bradley just said, "Splat," and went on. And I think Petrescu popped up and called a foul. So good on him. You shouldn't have been where you were that close to the play. And then I suppose that we'll give you credit for popping up and calling the foul on the back end of that. If you're going to make that mistake, at least fix it. At least fix it if you're going to do that. Why not? So how's your soccer? Give me your idea. Give me your biggest game of the weekend. I mean, look, not everybody is enthralled by Barcelona and Real Madrid. Not everybody cares that much. I mean, look, those are two of the best teams in the world. There's no doubt about that. Zero doubt. Whether you care about Spain and La Liga in a general sense, that game was fun to watch because it was amazing soccer. It's probably among the best individual club matches outside of a European stage that you're going to get anywhere. Just top quality and good points on some of the stuff I read this morning going over this match. This was not your older brother's Real Madrid Barcelona. This wasn't Jose Mourinho's El Clasico. That Real Madrid's going to play. They're going to come at you. They're going to score goals. They're going to try to score goals. And that touch and volley from Benzema off the knee. Whoa, that was amazing. 202, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Rick. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Rick?
You know, intellectually, I know that the Clasico was an amazing game yesterday, and I watched it. And I've tried watching La Liga before, and I find the history of the rivalry compelling. But it just does nothing for me. La Liga does absolutely nothing for me.
That's fair. I'm not gonna criticize you for that, Rick. I mean that's it comes down to personal choice. It comes down to whatever strikes your fancy. And this is part of that thing that soccer fans in general, but American soccer fans especially, have to get over. Let people have their own likes and dislikes. If my thing is if my thing was MLS and MLS only, and I don't give a flying whatever about anything that happens in England or Spain or Germany, then that's my choice, and vice versa. Go ahead.
I just find it fascinating because you look at how and maybe this has happened to you too. You look at how your taste in soccer evolves over time, and you go from thinking that the EPL is the be all and end all, and then you get exposed to more styles and more teams. I would infinitely rather watch Philip Lahm or Daley Blind direct an attack from the back line and destroy attacks coming in than watch Messi make the most spectacular shots and passes.
You know what it is? You know what it's like, Rick? I'm going to use a kind of a ham-fisted analogy here that Trevor's probably going to hate, but it's sort of like music, okay? Not everybody likes the same sort of music. And while I can intellectually recognize that something like the London Philharmonic is among the best musicianship in the world, it's not my choice of music if I'm going to go listen to something, right?
No, it's just like that. It's like art. It's like any number of things. I just think it's fascinating because I'm not into La Liga, but yesterday I watched because it's the Clasico and the great players and all that, and it just I felt nothing.
Really,
and
I don't know how that. Okay, you're completely entitled to your opinion, Rick, but I don't know how you feel nothing because that game was played at such an amazing pace, with such intensity. And I know it's a little bit of flopping and Pepe's going to go down and we're going to get, the penalty calls are soft or not soft. They changed the game, and after the game, Ronaldo's crying about a conspiracy. That stuff is nonsense, but that game itself, thanks to the call, Rick, I got to go, man. I appreciate the call. Appreciate it. David Cartledge will join us. Speaking of La Liga and El Clasico, to go over that game. We could spend probably half an hour. We don't have half an hour, but we could spend half an hour. All right, let's get this. Here you go. This is your choice of music by Nathan McVitie, contributed to Soccer Morning on Indiegogo, and he picked it. It's the 1990 England World Cup theme by New Order. It's called World in Motion. Thanks a lot, Nathan. I appreciate it. Bye.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
How do you not dance to the song? I don't know. I feel like I cut it off too early. If you really, really can't stand it, blame Nathan. Apologies. We are trying to get in touch with David Cartledge. Having a little trouble doing that. We will continue to try to get David on the phone to talk about El Clasico yesterday. In the meantime, our phone lines are open here at Soccer Morning, 347-756-6276. Tell me, how's your soccer? How's your football? I'm going to really try to get that as a greeting, by the way, between soccer fans. How's your soccer? Is anything wrong with that? Anybody have any issues? Like, it expresses a concern for how that person's enjoyment of the game is. Like, if I said to Rick, who just called in the last segment, told me he doesn't really get with El Clasico. I say, how's your soccer? He said, oh, it's all right. Pretty good. The Union are doing this. MLS is doing that. The national team, if that's his thing, whatever his thing is. Whatever your thing is. If your thing happens to be World Cup themes from the 1990 World Cup for England, then this is your show. Congratulations. This is your show. 347-756-6276. We'll continue to try to get David Cartledge. In the meantime, let's talk about MLS, I suppose. Well, we've got Charlie Bowman a little bit later to do that. Maybe we can talk about David Beckham. Let's talk about stadium renderings. Have you seen the Port Miami, David Beckham, Miami Club of Soccer, Football stadium renderings that are out this morning? You may have seen them at the Daily Mail. Don't give the Daily Mail your traffic. Go to the Miami Herald. They've got the pictures too. In fact, I think they've got a couple of pictures that the Daily Mail doesn't have. Outlines everything that they're planning for this stadium at Port Miami, for this Miami MLS team that should be coming in the not too distant future. Now they've got to get the stadium deal before they officially get a team. All we have so far, sort of recap this, the Beckham experience in Miami. All we've got so far is David Beckham standing up in front of a bunch of people and saying, I want to bring a team to Miami. Don Garber standing up in front of that same group of people with David Beckham there and saying, David has decided to exercise his option. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means they're going to try to get the stadium deal done so they can have a team. And I suppose that this is the right way to go about it in terms of the order of events. They didn't do that in New York. They said, screw that in New York. We're going to just hand Manchester City a team for $100 million before they ever figure out the stadium deal. By the way, we get to look forward to those stadium renderings too. But these Port Miami stadium renderings are very nice. They're gorgeous. The skyline right there. It's it's picturesque. It's a postcard. They've got this whole idea of what it'll look like when the area's built up, and there's going to be a nightclub in the stadium, open year round. I suppose if you're going to make the stadium a center of activity on non-game days, then put a nightclub in it in Miami. Make it the trendiest nightclub in Miami, and you'll get a good couple of year run out of that, right? How long does the average nightclub last? Not that long. Probably worse than the restaurant business. But in Miami, hey, if David Beckham can make an appearance every now and then, that club will be fine, I'm sure. It looks great. And the thing about stadium renderings that always gets me is they always look great. It's always got that shine on it. It always looks as good as it possibly can. But it's fake. Ultimately, it's fake. That's not what reality is going to look like. It may look good. It may look great. It's not going to look like that. It may be close if they build it. Because the other thing about stadium renderings is that they're a tease. Especially in a case like this, when there is significant opposition to David Beckham building at the Port Miami site. Royal Caribbean? Nah, they're not down with this. They've got a big cruise line hub or whatever that place is called, where cruise line ships, ocean liners. That's what they are, ocean liners. Wherever they dock and do their thing, it's right there. Same area, I guess. I'm not a Miami guy. We need some and I know my friends at the Southern Legion are listening, and I know they continue to take those little shots about whether or not Miami can support an MLS team, whether they're going to get this stadium done. And I know they're hopeful. I guess there's going to be a push for this. I mean, it's interesting because stadium renderings have become a tool in the propaganda machine meant to push along the process of getting a stadium built. We've got DC United stadium renderings. That deal's not done. Alan Liu hasn't gotten all of his ducks in a row in DC. They haven't executed the land swap. They haven't figured out how to secure that last parcel from the salvage yard. None of that stuff has happened yet. And yet we have renderings. Why do we have renderings? Well, yeah, sure, to be prepared so that if the deal gets done, they can put those shovels in the ground and start building right away. I mean, you need blueprints for that. You need actual construction plans for that. You don't necessarily need the renderings. Now, I know the renderings put the visual in everybody's head, but the renderings serve a purpose. They're to get people excited. They're a piece of propaganda. Beckham's team did not release these renderings for any other reason than to get soccer fans and people who might be inclined to help him out something to look at and get excited about. Look at what this is going to be, people. You don't have to imagine it anymore. Here it is. Stephen Brand on Twitter. Call it Club 23. There you go. I like that. Kind of boring. Kind of prosaic, but I suppose. Now, if you've got New York City FC is Club 20. Orlando is 21. I guess if Atlanta got in at 22, then Beckham's team can be 23, and then it's perfect. It all lines up. It's like the universe creating the perfect opportunity to the number 23. Everything comes back to 23, people. Do you know this? Juan on Twitter says the images are great, but so have DC United. And that's exactly my point. Exactly my point. We are no closer to DC United getting their stadium built than we were when they announced the original plan of a plan. And now you've got the mayoral race happening in DC. The Washington Post has come out in favor of a candidate who was against the stadium deal, or at least on paper saying she's against the stadium deal, or in the press saying it, making that weird argument that we should be spending more money on schools instead of this when it's not a zero-sum game because it makes for a good soundbite. Gringo Mark on Twitter, tourism money moves Miami as a Miami, and I can tell you that it will work. It is called Port of Miami. The AAA has bongos. I don't know what that means. The AAA has bongos? Okay. All right. Rick on Twitter, DC United not any closer than they were in 96. I don't know that that's true because you have active advocates working within the DC government trying to get this done. And the mayor has come out in favor of it. So I honestly think that they're getting closer. They're just not there yet. And as I said, all the renderings are there to do is get people jazzed up and give people something to look at. So when people say, hey, look, we want to build a stadium for the soccer team here. Oh, yeah? What's that going to look like? Oh, here you go. Here's a rendering. You can look at this now. We're going to put the nightclub here. Look at the backdrop. Skyline of Miami. Woo! Look at how beautiful it is, guys. Imagine a night game at the Port of Miami Stadium. David Beckham there looking dapper. Celebrities coming out. That's what it's about, to get the image in the head of the people who may be on the fence. Certainly to jazz up the base. Get out there and send those emails. In DC United case, send those emails. What was the story last week? DC government has been inundated by thousands upon thousands of emails through the website that DC United started to back the stadium campaign. And I think it was like it was like an average of 11 emails a person. It was like so many people have sent so many emails, and it was an average of like 11 emails a person. But it's in the thousands, the email total. And that's what the renderings are meant to do. If we just said, hey, here's a stadium, like we want to build a stadium. No pictures, no idea what it's going to look like. You're going to get less reaction. Basic human response. Visuals. We're all about visuals, especially guys. We're all about visuals. That's why it's called stadium porn. That's why it's called stadium porn. Every time anybody wants to build a new stadium, we got to get the renderings out there. And I'll tell you, having run a couple of websites that were inclined to post stadium porn, those things drive hits. People want to click on them and look at them. Oh, Gringo Mark filling me in. The AAA, the AAA is American Airlines Arena. I just didn't connect the two. Sorry, Mark. And they have a bongos a club called Bongos in their arena. So there you go. So this is already a thing that's being done. The club in the stadium. I'm sure they could be creative with that stadium in Miami and figure out a way. Is it? I'm going to say Auntie. I'm probably getting that wrong. You're on the air.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you? Say your first name for me so I don't mess it up.
It's Auntie.
Okay, well you've got a pause in there that my American tongue is not going to be able to handle. But what's up, man?
Yeah, I'm good. It's fine. A few things. How much time do I have?
You have like 2 minutes, unfortunately.
Okay. First of all, what do you think? Is it easier to get a stadium built in DC or New York?
I've been asked this question before. I think they are both equally difficult, and there's red tape and city politics that impact both efforts that make it very, very difficult. So I can't pick. I mean, it's literally impossible to pick one or the other. I want to say New York, partly because of the cost of land. But DC United's government is Washington, D.C.'s government, local government is so impenetrable sometimes that it makes it almost equally as difficult.
Okay. The second thing is about the CBA coming up for the MLS players. What do you think if, this idea is that for a player who has been with a club for at least 3 years, his salary would count only as 90% towards the cap, and maybe after 5 years, only about 80% towards the cap, and so on, maybe, so that it would, because there seems to be this thing going with MLS that, players keep jumping from place to place, and there's not too many Ryan Giggs kind of stories.
Interesting. I think that it's some kind of loyalty advantage could work. I mean, look, MLS has got a rule for everything else. Why not put a rule in that allows players to stay to make enough money to stay with a club, and the club to get a discount on them if they're there long enough? I could go with that. Yeah, sure. It's a decent idea. We'll put that to the people, and I'll ask Charlie Boehm about that when we come back. I appreciate the call, man.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
There you go. Sorry. So we got to come back. We're going to talk to our friend Luke Moore from the Football Ramble about the Premier League weekend, and it's fitting. Got the 1990 World Cup song right here. Here's the rap portion of the song. I know you were waiting for it.
Facts, but you must get to the line. They'll always hit you and hurt you.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now by our friend Luke Moore from the Football Ramble. Luke, I have to explain the music.
I was about to say, you've changed it.
Well, do you know what that is?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah,
Okay,
it's New Order, World in Motion.
Of course you do. Of course you do. I'm sure this is like drilled into schoolboys when you're a kid in England, right? Do you have to listen to it and learn all? No, I'm kidding, of course. But of course you know.
We all used to try and learn the John Barnes rap at school.
Well, actually, I have that. I have it queued up. Hold on. Hey, here it goes.
You got to hold and give, but do it at the right time. You can be slow or fast.
All right, I'll just make that underneath us for a second here. Okay, so let me explain it. We did a fundraising campaign to start the year. I'm going to fade him out. Just go away. Go away. We did a fundraising campaign to start the year, and one of the rewards was you could pick the music for the show for the day. And we happen to have an individual who decided that song is the only song he wants played on this show today. So that's
an excellent choice. I mean, you can't argue with that, can you?
Well, I'm not English, Luke. So for me, it's a really bad song from 1989 or 90 or whatever it came out. But I'm sure for Englishmen, it's a nice little bit of, it's a bit of nostalgia, I suppose.
Yeah, indeed. It's the last time that the England football team were actually decent.
and it's funny because I watched One Night in Turin not too long ago, just maybe a week ago, and this song all over that documentary, which is about the 1990 World Cup for England. All right,
I read the book by Pete Davis. It's really good. It's called All Played Out. I recommend it.
There you go. So I may have to pick that up as well. All right. Well, so we're not here to talk about World in Motion, and we're not here to talk about the 1990 World Cup. We're here to talk about the Premier League.
That's false pretenses.
Let's talk about Chelsea destroying Arsenal on the weekend. And look, a lot was made of round numbers. A lot is made of round numbers, and it was Arsene Wenger's 1,000th game in charge of Arsenal, and that's a wonderful milestone. And then he went out and got a tonking from Chelsea. One of these things. Sometimes these games snowball, and you get behind 1 or 2 goals, and you really just stop playing. I'm not saying that Arsenal did, but you give up 6, and it seems that way. Is that what happened here? Or was it something fundamental about Arsenal that led to this half dozen?
Yeah, it was a day to forget for Wenger that he won't be able to forget, because everyone will always know that it was his 1,000th game. So from that point of view, it's obviously sickening for him. It is always worrying when a team loses by that amount. I mean, if we go back earlier in the season when Andre Villas-Boas' Spurs side, when they were losing in a big way, and it does sort of seem a bit worrying, because of course Chelsea are a really good team, and especially going forward, and especially at home. Mourinho's obviously not lost a league game as Chelsea manager at home. I think his record is something like 76 games and something ridiculous like 60 wins or something like that. So it was always going to be a tough assignment for them. And they didn't start well, which is these sorts of hidings are normally predicated by a really poor start, which came. But you've really got to question the sort of mental fortitude of the Arsenal team, because it's not the first time they've had a hiding against another big team. They seem to have a psychological problem when it comes to playing against their rivals at the top of the table. Arsenal shouldn't be losing by that amount, really, to anyone. I mean, they've gone to Bayern Munich and not been beaten that badly. So it's a really difficult one for them psychologically. I think Wenger doesn't necessarily inject the greatest mindset into his sides against those types of teams. And then you've got to look at individual players as well. I mean, Chesney was very poor. Of course, the sending off didn't help. Okay, I know it was a case of mistaken identity, but a player certainly deserved to be sent off.
Yes.
I mean, Koscielny got injured at half time, and so it just seems to be, when it goes wrong for them, it seems to go wrong in a big way, and it is really something they're gonna find tough to win anything consistently with that sort of mindset in their team. Now, of course, they may go on to win the FA Cup, but realistically, they're not going to win anything major, I don't think, outside of that, unless they address these problems.
You add this to the beating they took against Manchester City 6-3 and the loss against Liverpool 5-1. Both of those games away, this game away as well. That doesn't really excuse anything. And as you said, it seems to be a mentality issue. And again, it's sort of an impossible thing to pin down, but you watch Arsenal play, you hear Wenger speak, you sort of see what they have, what they deal with week to week in terms of injuries, and and maybe just a bit of inconsistency, and you just always feel like they are that one moment away from just folding, and that's what they did, and that's why they are essentially out of the title race at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there was probably more reasons to it than that, but that's certainly one of them. I think they're lacking a real top class striker.
Yes.
I think Giroud is a more than capable squad player who actually can do a job against the teams that aren't as good. But I don't think he scored a single goal against any of the top teams since he's played for Arsenal. I might be wrong on that, but he certainly hasn't this season. You knew he was never going to score. He had that chance early on, didn't really strike it with any conviction. Okay, it was a good save, but he wasn't realistically going to score that. And behind him, they've got Yaya Sonego, who's completely unproven. Looks pretty handy when he's played, but I mean, realistically, he's not going to set the world on fire just yet. And I've got no one else. And it's not. You cannot achieve on even really one front, let alone multiple fronts, unless you've got more firepower than that. Now, Chelsea have got well-documented striker problems, but I mean, their strikers are contributing. I mean, Eto'o opened the scoring at the weekend. He's got important goals for them, Eto'o. He scored a hat-trick this season. He's a player with a lot of experience. He's been there and done it all. And Chelsea have got arguably the world's best 2 or 3 attacking units in terms of attacking midfielders. So I mean, they can deal with it. But I mean, Arsenal can't really handle it without a top-name striker, and they didn't take the opportunity to get one when they had the chance. And that's a big part of the reason, in my view, why they're not going to win much this season, if anything.
You mentioned Eto'o, and it's interesting to sort of see what he's doing. And I don't know where you put. I mean, where you put the credit for Eto'o playing as well as he is. I mean, he's a capable striker. He's always. I mean, I suppose that I guess you factor in the age, and we had the age crack from Mourinho and that leaked out, and you just wonder: is Mourinho as masterful as he seems, and is he the one responsible for what Eto'o is giving them, or is it just a matter of a hot striker finding a rich vein of form?
He's a great player. He's he's a superb player.
Right.
He's performed in Champions League finals. He's lifted the Champions League. He's he's a world-class striker. Now, when I saw him play when he first signed, I didn't personally think, this player is too old for the league.
Okay.
I thought he's been playing elsewhere where the standard isn't as high, and it'll take him a while to get his pace back up to standard. The thing is with strikers like Eto'o, he's such quality. He's of such great class and quality. If you give him any sort of space, he'll punish you. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need to be running at 100 miles an hour into that space. He can drift around a bit. He can play with these 3 really sort of vibrant, fluid attacking midfield players behind him at Chelsea who will run off him and run into space. Mm-hmm. I mean, look what we've got at Spurs with Soldado. Soldado isn't playing poorly because he's a poor player. He's had a difficult season for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons is because midfielders haven't been running off him effectively enough. Mm. But you give Eto'o any sort of space, he'll kill you. Yeah. He'll absolutely kill you. He's done it at the highest level for such a long time. And Mourinho can get the best out of him because Mourinho can get the best out of pretty much any player he decides he wants to get the best out of.
Yeah, I mean,
like I say, Eto'o's performed for them.
I suppose that I'm guilty of not forgetting about Eto'o, but I suppose there's not a better way of saying it when he went to Angers, and that it was about the money and sort of write off a player. Not that Samuel Eto'o became a bad player the second he signed for Angers, but you just sort of put him in this different category where he doesn't feel like one of the best strikers in the world, and now he's back on the biggest stage for a manager who knows how to use him properly, playing in front of all of those attacking midfielders, and he's showing again why he's one of the greatest strikers in the world, I suppose.
It's also a case of managing him and managing his body and using him in the right way and for the right amount of time. And he's still got an awful lot to offer, as he's proved. Mm. He's a great striker. He's a sort of, he hasn't got. The thing is though, he hasn't got to be world class to score against half the teams in the Premier League anyway. Because defensively, half the teams in the Premier League, I mean, we saw the amount of goals that were scored this weekend. Half the teams in the Premier League defensively aren't really anything to write home about anyway. Certainly not on occasion. So he hasn't really got to be at his very, very best to score against them anyway. And we know Arsenal's problems, we just discussed them earlier. When they concede, they're generally quite a good defensive unit. When they concede, they tend to concede in a big way, and they tend to be individual mistakes, and they tend to sort of really lose their heads. And you do that against a player like Eto'o when he's 50 years old. He'll still score.
Yeah, the number of goals scored this weekend, I think it was 42 in total, is an indication that at least on this particular weekend, and you're right, over the more than half the league probably is suspect defensively. But at least on this weekend, there were a host of individual mistakes. I mean, I watched the Tottenham Southampton game when Spurs came back and to win that game, and you just sort of shake your head at some of the mistakes that are being made. And I thought for the life of me, I thought Spurs had Spursed it up, for lack of a better phrase, Luke.
Yeah.
And
right.
I wonder, I mean, look, Spurs is a fascinating tale of, I don't know, intrigue and change and aspiration that just never seems to work out as the way it's supposed to. And I'm not going to take this one result and draw it out into something much bigger. And who knows where their season is going to end up. But they certainly showed a little pluck when I wasn't sure they had that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really encouraging for Spurs fans. It always is when you start off poorly and then you can turn it around, because it takes a certain amount of steel and determination and hard work and desire to actually want to do it. Because we've seen what happens elsewhere on the weekend when teams get a couple of goals behind early on. They don't fight for it and they find it difficult to turn it around. And the Spurs managed to do that. Of course, Spurs have got problems which extend way beyond a couple of defensive lapses by an inexperienced player in Carl Norton, but you wonder really what the future holds for them, because the chairman seems to be coming to the end of his cycle, I suppose, to use a polite phrase. Fans are sort of losing patience with him, from what I know, and you really do have to wonder what they're trying to achieve with the way they run the club. And the example I used, I think on my show last week, was that they were linked with Brendan Rodgers. And they didn't get him. And if they had have got him and he finished seventh with them as he did with Liverpool, he probably would have been fired. And now look what Brendan Rodgers is doing at Liverpool. There seems to be like in an idea of long-termism and stability and stuff, but they don't actually hold their nerve and stick to it. And now they fired Andre Villas-Boas with no real plan of who to put in. And now Sherwood's got a job to the end of the season, and he's 99% certain that he'll be off in the summer. And then it depends what happens at Arsenal if Wenger moves on, and it depends what happens at Manchester United if Moyes perhaps moves on. That'll hugely dictate what new manager Spurs can get. And if they want a long-term manager, they need to sort of stick with him, really.
It seems that they are the way that you paint that picture, and so much of it is a trickle-down effect, but the way you paint that picture is Spurs is forever going to be reacting to what everybody else does, and will that ever help them get over that hump that they're trying to? Now, look, they're in fifth right now. They're 6 points back of Arsenal, but they played one more match, and Everton's right behind them, 2 points behind them with 2 games in hand. So it doesn't.
I don't see them getting top 4 this season. There's not a chance of that, in my opinion.
Do you see it all Arsenal falling out of the top 4? Give Everton a chance?
No, well, it's possible, but I don't think Spurs will break into the top 4 this season. I just don't think they're consistent enough. I don't think the manager's experienced enough, and I don't think they've got. To be fair, they have had a fair share of injury problems, certainly at the back. Mind you, that they're out of the Europa League now, so they may better concentrate on it a bit, the Premier League a little bit more exclusively. But I don't see it. I don't see the break into the top 4 with Sherwood as a manager. I can't see that happening. I just think, really, as a more general point on Spurs, Daniel Levy put his reputation on the line, getting rid of Redknapp for AVB, and said he wanted to go in a different direction and make it long term and do this other stuff, and he lost his nerve. Even if they get their number 1 target for manager this summer, which is apparently Louis van Gaal, he's not a long term manager. He won't be around for 7-8 years. They've really got to think about what they're doing and get a strategy in place. And if they can't do that, and if they can't commit to it, then maybe they need to have a change right at the very top.
Let's talk about Wayne Rooney's goal against West Ham. I mean, other than the goal, was there anything you took away from United beating West Ham at Upton Park? Yeah,
they need to play with Rooney right up top, and they need to play with Mata behind him. And they have nailed their colours to Rooney's mast. We've got offering a huge new contract and probably making him club captain. I think to that end, they should probably move on Robin Van Persie. He can't stay fit consistently anyway. He's not the youngest player in the Premier League by any stretch. Rooney plays better right up there, in my opinion. And he can play. They can play as a much more focused attacking like unit, who all know their roles when they're not trying to shoehorn players in and sort of fit pegs into holes that don't really fit and stuff. So I would I would take that from it, and I would move on with Van Persie, which I know sounds quite controversial, but I don't think it would be a difficult thing to do long term, and I think it would free up a little bit of space for them and a little bit of creativity and use Mata at his very best, which is of course what they paid all that money for. And in my view, like Mata on his day and when he's on form and happy, is certainly one of the best players in the league. So it would definitely feed into that as well.
You look at Mata and you figure if someone would just give him the opportunity, put him in his best position, he will again be one of the best players in the league. And Robin Van Persie, I don't know how I suppose it sounds controversial because they've been so dependent on his goal scoring, but he's had his issues this season, and there have been questions over whether he really wants to stay anyway. I don't think they need much pretense to move him on.
No, he's getting older as well. His injury problems aren't going to improve as he gets older; they're going to get worse. And the very best, they'll stay the same. It's not really even me just saying it out of the blue. They've essentially nailed their colours to the mast with how they've acted around Wayne Rooney. They want to keep it. They want to make him the biggest part of the club. In my view, he's become bigger than the club, which is a bit of a no-no. But when they've done that, they might as well use him most effectively. And if he doesn't like playing right up top, then I suppose he's got to be managed into wanting to do that, because he's had some great seasons playing right up top and scored an awful lot of goals. And that's very important, clearly, for a team who wants to compete. And you've got a number 10 ready-made in Mata pulling the strings. It's quite a funny one because they have a number of players who all want to play in that number 10 position, who are perhaps slightly different players, but all want to play in that position. Because you've got Rooney who wants to play there clearly behind Van Persie, but it doesn't really work as well because you have to move Mata out. You've got Mata, who for me is the best candidate for the position. You've got Fellaini, who's not really well suited to a deeper midfield role, who played much further forward for Everton effectively. They've got Januzaj, who's this young pretender, very talented, whose best position probably is in the middle as well. And they've got Kagawa as well, whose best position is certainly through the centre. So they've not really bought that well in terms of personnel in those areas, because they've got loads of players who seem to want to play in the same position.
Which ends up leading to, as you said, putting players out of position, because you have such a wealth. It's not a wealth though, because they can't get the best out of them. So you can even call it a wealth at that position.
No, it's just a waste of time. I mean, English football's got a great tradition in taking number 10 players, playmakers, not really knowing what to do with them and pushing them out wide. And it's certainly happening still now. They need to really get a much more balance to their attacking players. And they could, I think moving Robin Van Persie on would certainly be a way of doing that. Now, of course, he may not want to go down that route. He may want to move on a couple of other players. But obviously, he can't move on Fellaini because he only just signed him. He can't move on Mata because he's only just signed him. They're not going to move on Rooney. I mean, they could move on Kagawa, but that wouldn't really solve the problem anyway. So that seems like the best way forward for me,
I think Dortmund fans and people who want to see Kagawa succeed, want him to get a chance, would love to see him move on, but that's a different issue.
I'm sure they would, yeah.
Yeah, last thing, because you get the free Shinji hashtag working. The last thing I'll mention is Liverpool 6-3 over Cardiff. They are 4 points back. They have a game in hand on Chelsea. They are legitimate title contenders. Are you surprised at that right now? Not based on what they've done this season, but would you have been surprised at the beginning of the year that Liverpool are a title contender at the end of March?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, purely because I think Brendan Rodgers actually seems quite surprised. But I think he's got a coherent plan there and he's implementing it, and it seems to be coming to fruition a little bit earlier than they expected. But when you score that many goals, you're always going to win more than you lose, and you're always going to sort of go on these runs that are on at the moment. I think they'll fall just short, probably. I think they'll come third behind Man City and Chelsea. But they've still got to play Chelsea and Man City at Anfield this season. And if they win both those games, then you can't rule anything out if that happens. But they score so many goals that they must be so confident of winning every game, because even they have the odd defensive lapse, which they do, and they've conceded more goals than the teams they're challenging for the title with. They still just score so many. And if you think of how many goals people were raving at Man City had scored for the first half of the season, well, Liverpool have always scored more than that. I think Sturridge and Suarez have scored more between them than Man United have scored in total. It's an absolutely ridiculous set of circumstances. And while you've got that many goals in your team, you can do it. I'd love to see them do it. I think I would, because they're playing amazing football. They score loads of goals. They've got quite a small squad compared to sort of City and Chelsea. They've not broken the bank in the same terms that those teams have, and I think it'll be quite, as romantic as the Premier League gets these days, which isn't very, it would be the best choice for everyone, for all the neutrals anyway.
It'd be a return to the top for Liverpool. It's been a very long time since they won the league. Luke Moore from the Football Ramble joining us as he does pretty much weekly. to give his insight on the Premier League. Appreciate the time as always, Luke.
You're welcome. See you later.
All right, talk to you soon. There he goes, Luke Moore from the Football Ramble. Good stuff there. You heard him. He thinks it's Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool. I'm looking at this table, and, look, Man City, 2 games in hand on Liverpool, 3 games in hand on Chelsea, 6 points back at Chelsea for first place. I can see the Manchester City. They dropped 5 on Fulham. Fulham's bad. I can see them, winning all of those games in hand, and then they're pretty much, again, the favorites to win the title. But I could see Chelsea win it. I think he's right about Liverpool, though. I think Liverpool comes up short, and it's a little too much reliance on that goal-scoring ability. Just a little too much. I mean, they've scored 82 goals. Manchester City has 76. Those are the top 2 goal-scoring teams in the Premier League. And then Chelsea, 62. So it tells you the gap between those 2 incredibly strong attacking teams, and then Chelsea, who is a really good attacking team, but probably isn't going to win the title on the strength of that attack. And I don't know that the axiom always holds, defense wins championships, but in this case, you kind of think for Chelsea, defense is going to win a championship if they pull it out. Manchester City could pull it out as well, very, very easily, and probably still the favorites. All right, we got a couple of minutes until we get to Charlie Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire to review your Premier League, your MLS weekend. Your MLS weekend. What was the highlight of your MLS weekend? 347-756-6276 is the phone number. I've got notes on notes on notes, and I will talk to Charlie about all of these games. Yeah, Clint Dempsey sitting out Seattle's win in Montreal with that 2-game suspension. I'm not sure that we fully addressed the 2-game suspension on this show. Did we talk about it? Did we mention it? 2 games for the nut shot in the Toronto game. Jurgen Klinsmann, in the aftermath of Clint Dempsey's suspension, essentially coming. I made this analogy on the Best Soccer Show, and I'm going to sort of repeat it here. This is the parent who thinks their kid can do no wrong. At least it comes off that way. I'm not saying that Jurgen Klinsmann treats Clint Dempsey like this all the time, but in this particular case, when Clint Dempsey is guilty of hitting another man in his most sensitive of areas and is suspended for 2 games, which I think seems fair to most people, unless your head is in the sand or you're just wearing rave green colored glasses. And Jurgen Klinsmann comes out and says, well, he was frustrated. He gets fouled all the time. He lashed out. So what? Man, come on. Yeah, I don't think you're doing Clint Dempsey any favors by saying this. And I think you're unfortunately biasing the league a little too much. Hey, what's up? It's producer Vince from Toronto. Turn the show down, Vince.
Oh, yeah, I did. Don't worry.
Okay, what's up, man?
Oh, well, obviously my highlight of the weekend was Toronto SC kicking butt again.
1-0. On paper, it doesn't look like a butt kicking, but I think in person and certainly on television for most people, it was a butt kicking.
The good thing was, watching the game, I never felt in danger of DC United, being threatening, because Eddie Johnson barely saw the ball, and Espindola was coming back into the midfield a lot to collect balls. And just DC United's midfield just wasn't up for the game. And I get the pitch had a lot to do with it, and I know Olsen wasn't too happy with it. Jason, did you see Michael Bradley run over the referee?
I did. I mentioned that at the top of the show. That was a great moment. It's like, hey, Petrescu, welcome back. Boom. Very nice.
American fans should be happy, man. He's playing phenomenal, and he's adapted so well. And even with these conditions, he was making great passes, doing good runs, helping out the fence when it was needed. And it's really great to see, man. I understand where you're coming from with FC Dallas and them probably being the best team in the league right now.
Yeah.
But like you said, I believe in the Best Soccer Show. If you start messing with them physically, they might not be able to hold up. I don't think you can do that to Toronto FC, not with the players that we have.
No, you're probably not going to push Toronto FC around a whole lot. I mean, certainly with Bradley's influence. Now, the thing you worry about with Toronto is 1 or 2 missing players, and suddenly they're a different team. They don't present as much danger. You got to score goals to win games. And, look, as long as Jermaine Defoe is on the field scoring, everybody's happy. Everything's great. Let's say he goes out with an injury. Let's say he makes the England World Cup squad and is gone for a month, Vince. What does Toronto do then?
You're absolutely right. That's gonna be that. And that's not just for Toronto FC. A number of other teams will have to deal with that problem. But I don't want Toronto FC to have to rely necessarily that heavily on Jermaine Defoe. That's why I was really bummed out with Bright DK. Even though had he been fit, we probably would have lost him as well for Nigeria. But he's a really good player, and he seemed to be coming into his own at the end of last season. And losing him. He's an experienced MLS player, and losing him means that behind him we have this youngster. I don't know if his name Wiedemann, whatever.
Wiedemann, yeah.
And a homegrown player in Jordan Hamilton, was probably not ready to start playing for Toronto FC. You got D-Row, who's getting up there in age, so it is difficult. I mean, that's why Gilberto is there. But if they're going to be playing them as a partnership, right, there has to be more depth behind those two players.
Absolutely. They just and again. I suppose that if you're going to pay that much for the guy to come from Spurs and be a part of this new look Toronto FC team, you want him scoring. And it's really not a problem to have him score all the goals in 2 games. You have to project this out and wonder when Toronto's reliance on Defoe becomes a problem if nobody else starts scoring. They could change it next week. I don't know. Who do they have next week?
Real Salt Lake.
Okay.
No Sabarillo, or maybe because he might get suspended for what he did against the LA Galaxy.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, that may or may not. I mean, that'll probably help TFC. Clearly, he's one of the best goal scorers in the league. But they need to get goals as well. And Real Salt Lake has leaked goals a little bit more than I think they would want to. We'll see if they can shut down TFC. And there are lots of positive signs in Toronto. It's not just. It's not just excitement over Defoe scoring goals. I mean, there are other things happening there, but I think the sense Toronto's going to need some settling in period of probably a month to a month and a half before we see really what they're capable of. And the problem with that is, again, that's going to come right up against sort of when the World Cup fever starts to kick in, and Michael Bradley's going to be gone at come May. So what do you do then? Lots of questions to answer in Toronto. Appreciate the call, Vince.
No problem, Jason.
All right, thanks a lot. There you go. Vince in Toronto with his thoughts on Toronto FC. All right, let's go. I got to make sure I get my music right, guys. Music today brought to you by Nathan McVitie, who helped us out on the Indiegogo campaign. When we come back, Charlie Bone from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire will join us, and we'll go through the entire MLS weekend. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Create the space, you know you can win. Don't give up the chase. Beat the
got to hold.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
There he is again. John Barnes rapping on the 1990 World Cup theme for England, World in Motion by New Order. Are you familiar with the song, Charlie?
Yeah, as familiar as I need to be.
That's perfectly put. It is our musical selection of the day per Nathan, who picked it because he contributed to the show on Indiegogo when we ran our campaign. So,
Nathan, let's get weird.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So we're here to talk MLS with Charlie Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire. Follow him on Twitter, cboehm, Boehm. Charlie, let's start in Toronto. Just got done talking to Vince about Toronto FC's 1-0 win over DC United. Great. It's going great for TFC. They've won twice. They've scored. They've got 3 goals from Jermaine Defoe already. Everything's rosy. My only concern, I presented this to Vince, is that they have a couple of players they rely on a lot. When those players leave, are they going to be so significantly different that it might impact their season to the point of keeping them out of the playoffs?
That's a sort of problem that Toronto FC are pretty excited to have, I would think, given how things have been for them in the past. But yeah, that's certainly a question to ponder. But I think one of the people that people aren't talking about very much right now is Osorio, for example. Jonathan Osorio has been pretty excellent for them in terms of a combination, central midfield combination with Michael Bradley. Maybe he's going to blossom a bit when Bradley leaves. Maybe they'll go a little more direct. I mean, they're already had an interesting discussion with a couple people on Twitter during that game about whether they are an English-style team, which we associate as being a slur, right, tactically. But when you think about the verticality is a kind of the way that the Spanish describe it of that team and what they're able to do using the channels in a 4-4-2 and getting the ball right, forward quickly and into dangerous spaces. I think there's a lot to be said for it. Now, you take away the $100 million worth of quality from that system, it might look different. But by that point, I think Ryan Nelson will hope that he's got a bit of a winning culture built up. He'll have a little bit of competition for places where guys have proved that they are worthy of stepping in when the big men depart. So, and of course, the schedule does tone down a bit during the group stage of World Cup, at least. So, I'm sure there'll be our Canadian friends north of the border will make no secret of their hopes for a 3-and-out for the U.S. national team, so Bradley can get back quickly.
What did you make of Gilberto?
I think I still don't feel like I have a clear sense of his value relative to his salary and where he fits into the team. But obviously that's a foil that forces teams to defend a little differently than they otherwise would with Jermaine Defoe on the field. That's an interesting combo of two guys who can both stretch the field and bring teammates into the attack. So I think that's something to look forward to for sure, because they still, I'm sure they would say that their chemistry is far from complete. So there's going to be a lot of maybe a more interesting pattern play that develops as those two get to understanding for each other's movements and each other's thoughts. But I think he potentially could be a fantastic partner for Defoe.
Step it to the other side. Let's talk DC United. This was the worst team in MLS last year. They are playing in the Champions League this year as a result of their U.S. Open Cup run, to the surprise of everybody. And I suppose that at the very least, we would hope they would have gotten good enough, better enough, that they won't embarrass themselves come late summer. And on the evidence of 2 games, I'm not sure we're seeing that right now. And look, Espindola, is he really going to be effective? Is there enough in the midfield for DC United? Did they? And I know that field was really bad at BMO. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe Columbus is better than we thought they would be coming into the year. But this hasn't started well for DC.
Yeah, and bad fields across the league. It's been a rough winter for most of the U.S. and we saw a little bit of the consequences of it in terms of the pitch quality, and maybe a few arguments for Merritt Paulson and the other synthetic turf.
It's that, Charlie, but it's also the argument against switching the schedule, is it not?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Let's be real here. Olivier Tremblay, who's the MLS soccer beat writer up in Montreal, mentioned over Twitter that he asked Frank Klopas, the Montreal Impact coach, about a fall spring calendar, and he said he thought Copas might burst out laughing, because I don't even want to go down this road. It's a tired topic for me because similar to other topics in this sphere, you get people talking past one another and people who are dug in on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's no question that it's not timely at this moment, and we see why MLS feels that way at the current time, and probably will for a long time to come. I mean, soccer-specific stadia are great, but they don't solve all these problems.
No.
And people have no idea what the true costs of winterizing MLS facilities really are.
So DC United, good. Are they better?
Yeah.
Are they better? I want to know that.
It's still they are a better team. There's no doubt about that. They have a lot more options. Ben Olsen's already shown, he's missing a big piece right now. Chris Pontius, who's been out for so long that we kind of take that as the norm instead of an exception, him being out with injury. He's got a troublesome hamstring issue that he lost a year of his career to it on his on one side, on one leg, and now he's having similar issues post-surgery with the other leg. So I'm still hopeful for their sake that he can come back, and for his sake as well. He's a special player, and I think he can change the dynamics there. But it's still a small sample size. It's 2 games. The issue is, will also there's a few issues, but one of them is, is the 4-4-2 working? Are Spindola and Johnson an appropriate partnership? If they're not, or if they're not yet, can Ben change things a bit? Can he maybe drop somebody into the midfield or shuffle personnel a bit to get things working a bit better? I think, and I also would warn people, it's easy to judge this team and assume they're going to be a laughingstock in the CONCACAF Champions League based on what you're seeing so far. But they showed last year, they were far and away, I think, the worst team in MLS last year, but they still put together a hell of a run in the Open Cup. It was a second season for them. Mm-hmm. And Champions League is going to be a tougher task in that light, but I see no reason why they can't do that again if things go wrong for them or don't go ideally for them in the league. CONCACAF Champions League may provide them with an outlet where they can take the mental load off a bit and play more freely. But it's still a little bit early to be ruling them out, I'd say.
Sure. I find it interesting, and we have to move on. I would love to have a further discussion about this. Number one, Eddie Johnson in service and how frustrated he potentially gets, I think, is a concern for DC United fans. And number two, down the stretch last year, and yes, with nothing to lose and nothing to play for, it made sense. They went young, and they went young with Americans, Connor Doyle, and a couple of these other kids. And they flipped that over. Bobby Boswell's in this team, and Jeff Park's in this team, and now you've got Eddie Johnson and Espindola, and you've got an older vibe to the group now. And I don't know. I just would have rather have seen them go with that youth project, particularly if this is a transition period for DC United in their club history. To go from worst to first is possible, but so unlikely that maybe there was a better way to go, Charlie.
Right. So, there are some really good young players, but they felt like they needed MLS experience, so they went out and got it. They didn't have $100 million to spend the way that Toronto FC did, and other teams had smaller but still substantial amounts to spend on roster renovations. They didn't have that option. That's the harsh but unavoidable reality in DC. They're not one of the bigger payrolls in the league. They still have a very cost-conscious ownership. So. And, Olsen, my fear was that Olsen would lean on the veterans more heavily, and so far that's absolutely been the case. Watching his team down the stretch, even last year when the season was effectively over in a competitive sense, months before the end of the season, we saw guys like Colin Martin and Connor Doyle get opportunities, but we also saw guys like Connor Shinosky kept on the bench in favor of what I thought were honestly journeyman veterans. I mean, James Riley, who's since moved on to the LA Galaxy, is a serviceable MLS player, but at this point I think he's a reserve first. But he was not only playing every game for DC United last year, he was playing out of position. He was moved into center back, taking away minutes that I thought would have better been spent on young players. So that was concerning, and that's something that I think segments of the hardcore United faithful are concerned about. Ben's ability to mold young players.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Look, they needed to get better. They needed to be competitive. They're hemorrhaging fans in that building, and it's a terrible building to begin with. And they're waiting on the stadium. I understand a lot of factors going on in DC, So let's before DC United becomes the only thing we talk about, I am going to move us on. Let's talk about the big clash out west. RSL, LA 1-1 draw. Goals from Saborio and Robbie Keane. This was LA coming off of their Tijuana debacle, and I thought that they were ripe for RSL to make a statement. That RSL had already gotten the win in LA 2 weeks ago. Any disappointment on RSL's part that they didn't put LA to the sword in this game?
Certainly there was. I mean, they could have been up 2 or 3-0 less than half an hour in on that match. And I think that's what you try to do in that situation when you have a team coming off short rest and a little bit of travel. But I was intrigued actually that after the game we saw RSL tried out an unusual excuse. They said that they were feeling the altitude. They haven't been at home very much in preseason, and so they were feeling the effects of their own supposed home field advantage.
No, that's not going to fly. No, you can't. No,
yeah,
no.
I mean, maybe there's something to that, but that's you certainly don't want to hear that from your team.
No,
I had Joao Plata as one of my players of that match, and he came out in the 36th minute. That says a lot. They lost their edge, their dynamism up top when he came off with a hamstring injury.
They don't
really
they don't need him out for very long. He's been one of their best players, period,
absolutely.
This season.
2 goals, 2 assists, I believe, so far, or similar numbers after just a few games. So he's been outstanding, and now they have to find someone else who can step into that role. And maybe they do, but I think it was a real wasted opportunity. Matt Doyle over at MLS Soccer made the point that these two teams should not have played one another twice in 3 weeks this early in the season, and maybe you saw a little bit of that, and that the game really ground to a halt in the second half. Things got very touchy. A few late challenges flew in here and there, and it really took a toll on the quality of the match. And I think LA will be very happy with that, even though they lost a couple of players to injury. A moment of brilliance from Robbie Keane, a fantastic textbook solo counterattack goal, and they get out of there with a point. Definitely a missed opportunity for RSL.
Yeah, almost a game that you sort of you try to get through, try to get whatever you can out of it and move on from an LA perspective. As you said, RSL disappointed. Arena getting tweaky with his tactics and going with a diamond.
Yes, and it worked. Very impressed with that.
Yeah, there you go. It's one of those oddball games, and as I said, Bruce likes to complain, and a lot of people like to tune him out. But in this case, he's got a legitimate concern, a little bit legitimate beef. Why MLS is giving him back-to-back games like this against the same opponent doesn't make. I realize. Look, we got to move things around, try to give them an advantage as much advantage in the CCL as possible. It didn't work, and now here they are, hosting and going to RSL in 2 games that they played this year. It makes it tough to pin down exactly how good LA is going to be right now. I don't know. Moving.
Honestly, I have some of the same thoughts about them as I do about DC, in that, they brought in a lot of new faces, but did they really upgrade the talent levels, as dramatically enough as you would think they intended, given their aspirations?
Well, I mean, look, you sort of see on paper what Bruce is doing with signing Samuel and Rob Friend and having a big target forward option up top. It makes sense, but then you remember that really when Keane and Donovan were at their best, they were playing up top together. They were playing off of each other. It was an understanding. And you sort of throw a big body in the mix. And I know the idea is knock the ball down, bring the midfield into the attack with Donovan. It just doesn't. I'm not sure that they figured out how to do it. They might in short order figure out how to do it and watch out. But for the time being, we're not really sure. Moving along, let's talk about Portland. They lose 2-0 to Colorado at Dick's Sporting Good Park. Both of those goals, penalty kicks, they came together. They came within minutes of each other. Number one, both of them penalties, no question about that. Number two, what's wrong with Portland?
Yeah, a really bizarre game. There was precious little to write home about other than that stretch of games, which is really strange. I expected to see these teams create a little bit more of a spectacle. Once again, it was a very, very cold day. Although the pitch seemed to be holding up better in Colorado than the other ones did in other cold venues. Portland has got these some new players whose talent to me is undoubted. Gato Fernandez is a great player. Valeri should be at 100% and fully acclimated at this point. Steve Zakuani provides width and thrust out wide, but there's still a little bit of a chemistry issue there, just in terms of the full fluidity that they need to have, the full understanding they need to have in Porter's system to really play at the speed that he demands. It's not quite there yet, and it was a little too easy for them to disrupt. And I still think their biggest problem is right in the heart there. Their central center backs don't convince me. It was Ka and and Footy Danso in center backs, and it was a gross giveaway by one of them that led to the second PK and the clinching goal for Colorado. So I think they've got to figure out what kind of team they're going to be when they don't have the ball. How are they going to defend? Are they going to sit back deeper and be organized? Are they going to press more and try and squeeze the field for other teams? I don't know if they all are on the same page in that sense, and I just don't know if those two particular center backs. They do have Paparazzo, as well. When he gets acclimated to the league, maybe he'll be a better ball-playing center back. But right now they don't have that, and I think they could really use that.
Speaking of, this is the team I've identified, and I said, look, it's a small sample size. I don't want to put best team in the league on anybody yet. But the team I'm most interested to see play week to week right now is FC Dallas. And they beat Chivas 3-1, and they look fun. They are just a fun team right now. And look, Oscar goes from Colorado, where he put together a surprising team last year, built around a bunch of rookies, and he goes to FC Dallas. And I'm wondering here, maybe again, small sample size, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but maybe Oscar Pereira is the guy to get Fabian Castillo to show all of that promise.
Certainly, he looks like he knows that roster very well. He was involved in the youth system there for several years, so I feel like he has a really good sense of who's coming through the club, what the club's character is like, and he's shown in multiple destinations that he's able to get the most out of players. And of course, we have to talk about Mauro Diaz.
Yes,
maybe the best playmaker in the league right now, and someone who's shown why they were content to part ways with
David Ferreira,
the 2010 MVP. It was he's dangerous on the dribble. He's dangerous with his long range passing, with his short range passing, in running at defenders, shooting from range. He seems like the total package, and Pareja is prepared to build the system around him. So fun team and a fun game, really. Chivas USA came out and played with them and got beat, but made that an interesting affair.
Yeah, look, and we'll say this about Chivas USA: they are not going to just sit back and try to frustrate teams. They're going to play, and it's probably going to end up with a rather poor season record-wise, partly because they just don't have the talent to compete. But there's going to be a couple of guys in that team that we will pick out and have fun watching. Thomas McNamara has shown very well so far. We know what Mauro Rosales can do when he's healthy. They have Bofa Bautista. They have Eric Torres, who may be a dark horse candidate for a Golden Boot, Charlie.
He gets on the end of things, and he's got so many more chance creators around him now. My big reservation with both these teams is the long haul.
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas we have to remember, was the best team in MLS for the first several months of last season, and then utterly went into a tailspin in summertime. So that's an issue, and Chivas has to show that they have the depth to compete, as the grind really sets in, week out. But these are two definite teams to watch that people maybe need to, once again, a topic you and I visited before, revisit your MLS stereotypes and shake out the old ways of thinking about these two clubs in particular.
There you go. Let's move on. Let me do this rapid fire. Breaking news, by the way, Julian Green's switch has been approved. I'm sure Charlie's seeing that from various people. I'm seeing it on Twitter. So you expect Julian Green to play against Mexico for the U.S. men's national team. Big news there, which we will address, I'm sure, in depth tomorrow especially. Let's hit on a couple of these other results. Teams you want to keep an eye on: Chivas USA, FC Dallas. Maybe a team that you thought you would want to keep an eye on that has yet to score a goal in this season is New England. They play goalless against Vancouver at home.
Yeah.
Is this something fundamental? Is it? They were unsettled. Gonçalves had his salary issue. Whatever reason, Kellen Rowe wasn't starting. Lee Wen was hurt. Is it just a matter of getting into the season and getting their feet wet, or is there something fundamentally wrong with Jay Heap's team right now?
There's tactical questions, and there's also personal and psychological questions. Perhaps we saw some progress on the latter front. We have Gonçalves back in the lineup. And we have some injured guys that are coming back. Lee Wen, I think, is very important to that team. was fighting off injuries the early part of the month. He seems to be getting back towards full speed. I think he makes a big difference in terms of his soccer brain in those attacking positions, getting the ball at his feet and trying to create those triangles and combinations. And then the back of midfield, the danger with their system, with kind of their, what I call them, their midfield gnomes, right? The scurrying, skillful types creating in and around the opposition's box, is that if you don't have a really good holder, and last year was Kellen Rowe, he struggled a bit so far this year. Andy Dorman stepped into that role on Saturday and seemed to be more able to be a lone holding midfielder. If you don't have that person to connect the front and the back, you end up with a broken team, and that can work in some occasions. And we're going to see a lot of broken teams at the World Cup. But at a club level, there's too much scouting. It's too easy for other teams to pinpoint those weak spots that you leave, especially deep midfield, and take advantage of it. So, once again, though, a year ago we were talking about this Revs team in similar ways. They're boring. They're not scoring goals. They're not putting it together. And then they managed to do so. I expected them to hit the ground running this season, but they obviously haven't, and there's a number of reasons for that. Mm-hmm. But from a more optimistic take, I think that they still have the ability to figure out those roles, answer those questions, and then move forward. And maybe, when that first goal comes, maybe it's going to be a flood. But right now, the other harsh reality for them is that Teal Bunbury is not Juan Agudelo. No. His hold-up play just isn't the same. His back-to-goal play isn't the same. His ability to bring other teammates into the attack just doesn't compare to Juan Agudelo's. Whether he learns those abilities or whether they have to play a little differently, we'll have to see. Some of my colleagues think they're going to end up going with two strikers because he simply can't play a lone striker role. We'll have to see.
I was going to bring us to Columbus 2, Philadelphia 1 in the home opener for the Crew, but bigger news.
Maybe the best game of the weekend.
Yes, but bigger news has just broken in Crew land, where Mark McCullers is now out as president of the Columbus Crew. I don't know what, I have to catch up on the news here, Charlie. I don't know what that bodes for the future. Clearly he was a holdover guy, and we got a new ownership group in Columbus, so I imagine this is part of that process. But let's talk about the Crew. Lots of good feeling around the Crew. They started the season with an absolute thumping of DC United, which was great, but came with a couple caveats. It's DC United. They go into this game at home and they beat Philadelphia 2-1 and 2 goals from Manor. Are we seeing something new and different from Columbus? What is Greg Berhalter doing that's working?
Yeah, he's got. I think he's showing so far, at least, that he seems to be an excellent coach, because everyone on that team, especially given how early it is in the season, has very clear roles. There's a very clear understanding of how they want to play. I think they're able to sit back and soak up pressure and counter, but they are also able to build and combine. And he seems to be doing a good job of maximizing Higuain's abilities, pulling back a little bit deeper, giving him some runners, some kind of workhorses around him to help win the ball and cover ground, and then giving him that opportunity to turn upfield, combine, whether playing long or short. And the DC game in particular was impressive for their ability to get forward very efficiently, but very effectively. I think their first goal was something like 3 or 4 touches covering 80 yards. So the McCullers news is intriguing. I don't know if it's just the continued sort of evolution of the new ownership. It's interesting to see that apparently Precourt, the new owner, is going to step into a more hands-on role in the meanwhile. That always impresses me, because if he's willing to step in and roll up his sleeves and take on those kind of duties, maybe that says a lot about him, and it also may speed up the process of evolution as that club. I mean, they've already said they're going to rebrand, they're going to change their logo and update their crest and kind of try and update their image, which we all know is decidedly MLS 1.0. And I think they show that they've picked the right guy in Berhalter, who has an analytical and sort of intelligent, calculating approach to the game. He's not from the old school per se, in terms of the guys who coach on feeling and personality. So I think they're definitely one to watch this season. And the Philly game was 2, I think, playoff teams going at one another.
Interesting. Philadelphia had started very, very well, and going on the road to Columbus. You won't think of it as one of the tougher places to go, but if Columbus is a markedly better team, at least from where they ended last year, then that makes it a tough out for the Union in their first or in that game. They got a result in Portland. That's a bonus. this one maybe you chalk up to going to Columbus and that team showing up and playing very well. All right, we're essentially out of time. Seattle beat Montreal 2-0. Anything of note there for you? Clint Dempsey missing for the suspension. Good result for Seattle across the country, across the continent.
He has an interesting wrinkle from Siggy Schmidt. He played his team in a 4-3-3 that we haven't seen a whole lot of. And it seemed to work very well. It created space and opportunities for Obafemi Martins. They were very good in transition, and I think they've got a fairly solid, it seems, back line they can build off. I don't know, Dylan Remick is a young player who sees their left back spot and seems to be doing pretty well. He's been targeted in both in this game and in previous games, and more or less weathered it. Maybe that'll prove to be a little bit more of a weak point going forward. But right now, I think they've showed that. I hope this doesn't become a talking point, but are things a little bit simpler for them without Clint Dempsey? Is it possible to have too many stars in the field? And who knows? Maybe this isn't fair. Maybe if we saw them with Dempsey but without Martins, maybe that would be a similar calculus. The problem with packing that kind of talent they've got on that team is finding clear roles that are acceptable for everyone. And everyone on the rest of the team kind of knowing who to look to. But I think they certainly show that, and we'll see again next week when they're without Dempsey again. I don't think his absence is going to be as crippling as it might seem on paper.
All right, I got to get out of here. The last two games of the weekend, which we don't have time to talk about. Sporting Kansas City beat San Jose on a penalty.
That was a grinder, as we expected.
As we expect, both those teams coming off of Champions League, it wasn't going to be pretty. Steven Linhart gets caught with a handball in the box. Dom Dwyer puts it away. There you go. And the other one I'm missing here as I try to scan, in Chicago and New York, 1-1 at in Bridgeview at Toyo Park, and both of the goals scored by Gingers. I suppose that's the headline. Exciting times there. Lewentowicz and McCarty getting on the score sheet. We'll see. New York again is unconvincing, and they may be all unconvincing all year. They rode unconvincing to a supporters shield. I don't know what's going to happen in 2014. We'll see.
We got to remember they did score a lot of goals last year. I think they were the league leading scorers.
I think you're right.
Season.
I think you're right. I think they did score a ton of goals last year, and maybe that's their saving grace if they could figure out a way to score some goals. But Pecky seems to want to tinker and move things around, and that doesn't bode well.
I mean, they were even last year. They were still shockingly inconsistent. Given the highs they showed the ability to score and shut teams down, there were games when they just didn't show up, and I think that was a constant frustration to him. He couldn't seem to find the week in, week out midfield balance where guys who could create chances, but also control the midfield and shut down the other team. So I think he's still looking for the ideal pairing in center midfield. He's going to platoon his outside midfielders for better or worse, and he does have some tools that he can do that with. But is Bradley Wright Phillips the best partner for Thierry on up top? I'm not sure. They showed some promise, but they may need better given the investment they have and the priorities they have this season. They may need someone who's a little more consistent in terms of creating and finishing chances up top. And then Chicago, I think there's some interesting questions there as well. It looks like Mike McGee is going to be asked to play a deeper sort of a role in the hole for Frank Yallop. And I'm not certain that that's playing to his goal scoring abilities to the maximum, but maybe that's going to be best for them long term. I think there's still questions there in terms of the roles up top, the movements, and the spacing and everything. So it was kind of a 4-1-3-2 that they played against New York, and maybe that's the answer for them. But I think they still have a designated player in Ongano that they need to figure out what to do with, and if he's worth the investment. So they remain very much a work in progress as well.
Charlie Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire. We have got to get out of here. Please go to iTunes, give us a rating and a review. I apologize again for Nathan's choice of music today. We will have better music. I'm hoping tomorrow somebody else's music. I don't know. Soccer Morning.
This is why you got to donate. They put their money
so
in
you
their
can
mouth.
do that, right? Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday edition of the show. Talk to you guys then. Bye.
You can win, don't give up the chase. Beat the man, take him on.